In this video, we are going to discuss about how to create your first AI coworker. So let's get started. So head over to Wexa app and you will be able to find an option to create a new coworker under Coworkers tab on the left hand side. So just click on create coworker and then it's going to ask you with a coworker name, role, and description. So in this case, coworker name is something that you want to call your coworker. It could be a humanized name or any name that you would like to provide. Role is the role that you wanted to provide to the coworker, and description is something that you wanted to describe your coworker. So these three fields are pretty much important, and now let's start filling the information. Yeah, let's call this as for example Tom, and then let's call this as product specialist. And then now let's go to, let's give the role called as web analyzer. Okay, what we are going to do here is it should go to a specific website, and let's say an e-commerce website in this case, and it should be able to scrape the details of the product. So what we would say here is scrapes the details of the product from the website URL. Now let's hit create. The moment you hit on create, you would be getting into the Coworker Studio. So now let's talk about different agent types here as the first step. So now you have two types of agents in a coworker. So a coworker can be considered as a container of multiple agents in this, and there's something called as a skilled agent and something called as a decision agent. Usually, skilled agent is an agent that performs a very specific task by taking a skill as one of the input attachment to it, and a decision agent is somebody who actually takes on a decision. So you can have a multi-hop decision making coworker using a decision agent. Like you can specify your decisions here. You can enter your possible decisions. Like for example, I can simply say that if the email doesn't match, in this case, for example, match is a decision in itself. Now I can simply say email matches. I can say is greater than 5, so on and so forth. So you can add any number of decisions that you want, and you will be writing the conditions related to these decisions directly in the task description. But that's another story when we talk about a decision agent. But right now what we're going to do is we're going to create a skilled agent. So the first agent that we are actually going to create would be to, we created a table in the previous video, right? So a table has it's a product information table. It has a product name, the price of the product, so on and so forth. So now what we need to do as the step one usually is to extract or get the structure of the table, because you wanted to teach your coworker to understand the structure of the table. So now the first thing that it will be doing here is get the structure of the table. So if you wanted to deal with something related to table, this is a pretty natural one, so you just have to do this by default. So in this case, I'll say data analyzer in this case. So we can say get the structure of the table. So the role description, you have to give a title, you have to give a role, you have to give a role description. So it's pretty straightforward stuff. Now you really have to explain the task to your agent. So the way that you do it can be different style for different people. This is purely agent engineering, where you are trying to instruct your agent to perform a very specific task. The best way of doing this is assuming that your agent is a 10-year-old and explaining your agent as if you're explaining to a 10-year-old. So now in this case, the task that I wanted to give to my agent is to your okay, so now your task is to get the structure the table. Now we can talk about advanced concepts like variables, but in many cases you may not even need this. Let's park that aside. Human in loop comes into picture when we wanted a human to intervene into this agent, process or decision making, and ask for an approval. So in this case it is an auto approval, we don't have to do anything as such. Now when it comes to actions here, this is very crucial. So we are really talking about something related to tables. So now let's select table and then select the table that we are really aiming at. So now in this case it is the product information table. Now there are different actions that are possible within the product information table. So you can add a row with your agent, you can add multiple rows with your agent, you can delete a row from the product information table. You can find rows based on a given query. That query can be like a very normal humanized query that you wanted to write, um, or you can get a single row, you can update a row, or you can get the current schema of the table. So what are the rows and what are the columns that are there? So in this case we wanted to get the current schema of the table. So now let's select this. We don't need a knowledge base in this case. We will leave this to GPT-4o mini. That's always the best choice, I would say, considering the costs and everything. You don't need to configure any triggers. Just to help you understand where triggers would be useful, you can actually call other agents using triggers, so or other coworkers using triggers. But in this case, we are not really using anything, so not necessary. So just submit. You have your first agent created. Now, how do you run it? Click on run button and you will be able to get into the run screen of your coworker. One thing to keep in mind is just make sure that you are testing your coworker every time you are creating a new agent. um, uh, Creating like 4 5 10 agents and then assuming that you would be able to test would be a very bad practice. We would really suggest that you create agent after another agent and then you finalize your entire coworker. This is always a one time task, so some level of patience is definitely required here. So now let's click on run, and in this case we'll say get the you don't need to do anything. Because it's something that anything you give it will start execution. So I simply said start, and then now it's automatically going to execute the agent. There is no start condition or anything. You don't need to specifically give anything in this case. Later on we're going to specify how to process the goal and everything. So now in this case it kind of got the structure. So it says that it obtained the structure of the table. It says there is product name, price, features, summary, brand, and then it is also saying that the underscore id column is of type string, where the other columns are all of type string. No links were provided for this particular task, so which means you are able to retrieve the structure of the table. And if you wanted to understand a little bit deeper in terms of what is there, so you can simply click on get the structure of the table in this. Because that's the agent that we just executed. So you will be able to go a little bit deeper, like what is the course of action. Like basically this is the observation from this particular agent. This is the plan. It's kind of reflection in this case, and then it just also listing out the kind of skill that was chosen, etc. And then finally in the output it already got whatever is the structure of the table. So you'll also understand what are the column IDs that were used. So this is a little bit an in-depth understanding for you. Think of it more like a debug console for you when you are working with multiple agents. So this would be helpful. So you can always look at the logs. You can figure out what is the input and output, and then figure out what happened while you're actually building your entire coworker itself. Now let's go back and let's create our next agent. So it is usually a linear flow. Okay, so this is a hard constrained linear flow wherein unless you are using a decision agent, it always goes from top to down, so it is easier for you to plan your whole process in such a way that you can create the structure the way that you want, more or less. So now let's click on plus button. So we are adding the next agent. So in the next agent, what we are going to do is we are again going to use a skilled agent in this case. So in this case, we'll say, scrape. So we wanted to scrape a website, or in this case, an Amazon product page, and then we need to populate that into the table. So now let's say scrape the information required. Okay. Next is, let's call this as the role is data processor. Okay, and then role description is scrapes the data from the product website. Okay, so now let's give the task. This, like I said, always remember you are explaining to a 10-year-old kid. So here are the steps you should follow, Mr. 10-year-old kid. Now the first thing that you'll have to do is, you will understand the website URL from the goal. Keep it very clear. So every time you give a goal, there is going to be a website URL in the goal. This is what you're really specifying in the task. The next one is, you scrape the information in the website. Next, Mr. 10-year-old, you will look for fields required in, let's be attached a product information table, right? Product information table, because we already mentioned that this is the structure of the table in the previous agent. So by default, whatever is the output of this agent is already available to this new agent that we are creating. So you could consider that your new agent already understands every output of the previous agent. It's accessible to them by default. This is by design. So I would say from the website, you are scraping. Okay. Now that's enough, I think. Now let's go to the skill. Let's add the skill called web scraper. If you remember in the previous videos, we have created something called as, a web scraper skill. So let's go to web scraper, click on done. That's it. You don't need to give any, any other information. So I'll still go with GPT mini. I will increase the token limit size because I would take it to 10,000, because I might be extracting more information than I need. I don't know what is there in the summary of that web page or anything. So let's submit. So we are ready. Now what we do is go to amazon.com. Let's take a very random, let's take this. Okay, so now let's take a nice Nespresso coffee machine. Let's copy the URL. Now let's start a new execution and give the URL here. So now first it's going to get the structure of the table, and then it is actually going to scrape the information required. So we will also see if it is able to scrape the information based on the structure of the table or not. Okay, so it got the structure of the table successful. Now it is using the web scraper and trying to scrape the information required. Um, let's see the output. Okay, let's see if it is at least, working in a single shot or not. Ideally, it should work. Yeah, it worked. So now let's see the output of it. Okay, so script continued shopping, etc., etc. It did understand certain aspect, but it is saying that okay, we need to make sure you're not a robot. Da, 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 da. So now let's try to give some other website. So let's not go to Amazon.com. Let's, because I mean this is more or less. Let's go to Amazon.in. Take one random one. Let's use a Canon website. Now let's restart this. Okay, what it said is that Amazon doesn't want a robot scraping its website. So that's the information that gave in the previous execution. So let's try once again by giving Indian Amazon website, and then let's see if it is really working or not. So it already got the structure of the table. Now it needs to scrape the information required. So let's see if it's going to work on Indian website or not. So it did go to that particular web page. Okay, so it is trying to extract some information. Hopefully it works. It's executing. It's going to take a couple of seconds because it needs to find the information that we're really looking for. Yeah, it did that successfully. Now let's see the output. So apparently, yes, here it actually got the information. Wow, that is interesting. They knew about that. Now let's go back, and then the next thing that we'll have to do is, this agent works, this agent works. Now what we want to do is, save that information into the table. So that is also pretty straightforward. So let's start doing that. So now let's say in this case, again, a skilled agent. Here we say save saves the data to table. That's the title of this agent. We will say data mapper as the name, and then maps the necessary data to the table. Now in the task, we're going to say here are the steps to follow. Oh, by the way, our web scraper in the earlier Amazon.com, that did not work because web scraper by default respects robots.txt, and that's the reason why it didn't pull the information. So in this case, let's say you will get the output of data processor, because we call this agent as data processor, right? Yes, so we call this guy as data processor. So now you will get the output of data processor. Now second, the table structure is already available in data analyzer. And then the third one, I don't care how you understand, but map the data. This is a great thing about Wexa as a platform, because you don't have to do any sort of mapping. It will automatically figure it out. So now let's say map the data required for the table and save it. That's it. And I don't want anything else. So in this case, let's say take the table. Let's select the skill of first select the table, then we simply say add a new row. That's it. Very important, keep your token limit to 10,000 here, because we don't know how many tokens are going to be output. Submit. There you go. We got the third agent created. Now let the magic begin. So now we essentially don't have anything in this particular table. Even if there is anything, let's get it off. So now let's delete all the rows. Okay, so deleted successfully. Now let's take exactly the same URL like we took in the previous execution. And now let's give the new URL to Excel. Yeah, let's see how this is gonna happen. So I'll fast forward it. It is scraping the information required. It is planning once again. So it scraped the information. Now it is trying to save the data to the table. It got the information that you need. Yeah, that's done. So now if you look at the total time it took, so now you can also see how much time it took. So it took close to 45 seconds overall, but again the total number of tokens that it consumed is around 20,000 tokens in this case, which is not bad. So now let's refresh the table and then see if we got the information. There you go. So you have the information, scraped and then saved. Now the beauty here is, now that I have this table out here, let me go and then I'll say I wanted to understand if there is an EMI option. Okay, so or maybe let's take something different, something other information that is very crucial. So now let's say manufacturer. There should be such kind of field, right? So there is manufacturer and there is country of origin. So now let's assume that we wanted the field manufacturer all the time. So now I'm just creating a new column in this case. Okay, so it is going to be a type string. I would also want to have let's say country of origin, because I like it. Of underscore origin, it's empty string. Now let's do one more thing. So now let's go for this lens. I'm copying this and I'm executing it once again. There you go. So it is now saving the data to the table. It's done with its execution. Now you need there is one decent observation here. I did not make any change to the agent there, because by default on the data mapper agent that I've created earlier in the Coworker, it is already clear that you have to map it dynamically. So now when I refresh this particular table, I should be getting the manufacturer and country of origin as well. So there you go. So now, obviously, for the first execution, you will not have this information, but for the second execution and subsequent ones, you'll be able to have this information. But this is how you actually bring in some sort of dynamism into the tables as well, and you'll be able to create multiple coworkers utilizing the same tables. So you just have to refer to the tables in the coworkers, and you can trigger actions from the tables. You can trigger coworkers from other coworkers. You can create a maze of coworkers working for you. And all the very best in creating some of the most amazing coworkers that we could ever think of. Thank you for watching.